I have a lot of relatives who live in and around the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in Tennessee. I only ever really see them once a year in our family reunion, which takes place in this terrifyingly old Southern Mountain Baptist church. I'll start off talking about my great aunt, who I'll call Sally. She was like the embodiment of every stereotype that you've ever heard about old cougar redneck women. She was a chain-smoking, lottery-playing, meth-dealing pimp. Her 3 kids, who I'll call Emma, Joe, and Steve, were no better. Emma dropped out of high school to have 3 kids, then got addicted to meth, and, according to my dad, sold her baby girl to her boyfriend's dad, who now has custody of the baby in exchange for drugs. Nobody knows where she is. But the last time we saw her, she didn't have her kids with her, and all her teeth were missing. Joe, on the other hand, has about 6 children, from 6 different women. He constantly, as is family tradition, goes and sells and smokes a ton of meth. He got into an argument with my uncle once over who was going to cut the grass of the family cemetery, and showed up at his house with a shotgun. He burned down my great-grandma's barn only because he was hiding a meth lab inside of it and was about to get busted. Pretty sure he still got busted. Steve is a little different because he's, unfortunately, HIV positive, and that makes him kind of a black sheep for the family. Yeah, the meth family who sells kids for money. Consider Steve to be the weird one in the group. My grandma won't even let them eat off their plates because down in their region, nobody really understands how HIV works. However, rumor has it that he's not just a victim of the disease, but instead one of those bug spreader types. If you don't know what a bug spreader/chaser is, it is someone who intentionally tries to give HIV to the largest number of people possible. And so, the 4 of these kids work on some straight-up shady stuff. A few years ago, my great-grandmother was dying, and Sally, my grandma's sister, was taking care of her. Apparently, Sally refused to give my great-grandma her medication until she would change her will. So then my grandma was completely cut out of it. Then, everything went to Sally and her 3 no-good kids. Now, flash forward to last year, Sally suddenly wins $100,000 in the lottery. Now, she's been playing scratcher tickets for the last 40-odd years, and she suddenly wins out of nowhere. Everyone just thought it was dumb luck, and that since she'd been playing so long, it was about time for her to win. But then, about 6 months later, she has a sudden, massive heart attack out of nowhere, and they find her dead in her house. And here's where things get even weirder. People have always suspected Sally of being involved in some weird, occultist lifestyle, because some story that people refuse to tell me about that happened in the 80s. And when they found Sally, there was literally blood all over everything. Her blood. But they couldn't find any cuts on her body. And there wasn't any blood coming from any of her orifices. And this is where I come in. Sally was in the possession of a red diamond ring that originally belonged to my great-grandmother when they found her dead. The story behind this ring was that during World War I, an American soldier got this ring from a dead German housewife and brought it back for his niece, who was the best friend of my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother, her best friend, and her best friend's pregnant sister had been accused of witchcraft by a local priest. The priest claimed she was carrying the Antichrist quote, unquote, and got their heads blown off by the sky, my great-grandmother's friend, and trusted her with this German ring. Some time passes and my great-grandma dies, and Sally steals this ring. Initially, she wanted this ring to go to Emma, but on her deathbed, my great-grandma told someone that she wanted this diamond ring to go to me. So my grandma sneaks into Sally's house after she dies and steals this diamond ring back. However, before Sally croaked, she told her kids that they weren't to let that ring out of their sight because of its value. And now, I'm being given threatening warnings down the grapevine that if I try and claim this red diamond ring when my grandma dies, that I'll get royally messed up. Honestly, I'm not exactly the jewelry-wearing type, but I have to know what the big deal with this ring is. I know it's got a huge monetary value, but there's all this weird stigma and superstition about this weird ring in my family. And for that, I have to try and get it.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all this support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
When I was 12 years old, my mom and I became homeless, and there was a waiting list of about 6 weeks before there was space for us at the local homeless family shelter. Thankfully, though, we were able to stay with a really good family friend of ours for the 6 weeks, which has a bed set. Communal living with shared bathroom kitchens and laundry facilities, I was really happy with this arrangement. As Jay the family friend was fun, young, and pretty, and she spoiled me rotten, getting me things to do and giving me lots of time and attention in between going to work. She also had a lot of different people going in and out of her rooms at all times of the day and night, as it was what some people might call a party house. Most of the people living at the bed set were awesome. There were a lot of musicians, actors, and bohemians from all different backgrounds and cultures. I made cupcakes with a drag artist who worked in a Soho club painted with an artist using her. Materials to make my mama a picture, and sometimes a goth band who lived there would come and jam. Letting me play their instruments with them, they were all lovely people, and a lot of them became quite protective of Mama and I. However, there was one guy, R, who Mama was a little mistrustful of. R was around 25 to 27, tall, lanky, and real pale, with brown, sad eyes at the time. I was totally oblivious to anything major, but I always felt slightly different around him to the other people who came in and out constantly. The feeling didn't so much come from me, but rather R himself, but I couldn't put my finger on why, being only 12. I was always an outgoing, friendly kid, around everyone I met, but for some reason, I was more reserved around R. But one night, it all kicked off. It was a Friday, and my Uncle P had come to stay. That evening, Uncle P had made macaroni cheese for Mama, me, and himself, and Jay was getting ready to go out for the evening. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, and on saying "come in," the doors opened. R appeared. I was scratching my uncle's back. Our entire family absolutely loved this activity. And after Jay told R she was going out and offered him a can of beer, she went to go get him one. When R said to me, "I'd like a back scratch too, sweetheart." When I said this, I felt my uncle bristle and he scowled at R. and there was an awkward silence that my uncle got up to get himself a can of cider. We heard my uncle swearing, "You're out, dog. She's my niece, and she's only 12 years old." Jay hurried into the kitchenette to try and calm things down, but the next thing I knew, R had run out of the bed set really quickly, and my Uncle P came back into the living room with Jay close behind him, looking vexed. Nobody said anything else about the incident that night, and Jay went out as planned. My father was an operation manager at NASA, and even I don't know what the real work he did there was. He said that it was completely classified, so he couldn't really discuss anything work-related with anyone. My mother left him a year ago, and I do go to her place, but I live full-time with my father. The very reason was that there was too much freedom when it came to living with father, because there was no one to stop me from doing anything. So I stayed with father, and he was way much cooler than my mother was. Then he decided to go up and mess up the perfect arrangement we had. He met some woman named Svetlana in a bar, and he decided to hook up with her. My dad was a nerd, but the girls he was hooking up with were hot, and this Svetlana girl was way too hot for a nerd like him. The first time I saw her, I was definite that she wanted to kill me, and much more, it seemed like she was scanning for things in the house. I wonder to this day what she was looking for, the very first day that she hooked up with my father. My father always said that he was too cool for these girls, and I always had a weird doubt about the confidence that he had. I decided to check up on Svetlana on the internet, and as I did, her profile was the most constructed profile there could be. She had the perfect white girl Instagram, and what I found undoubtedly suspicious was that her Instagram profile didn't match the personality that she had. But then everybody on the Instagram seems to be fake as they can be. When I confronted my father that I had doubts about this girl, he just ignored the doubts and told me to not mess around with that. I told him that she is not really the kind that you want to mingle with, knowing that she could be anyone, and my father's work was very confidential. I knew that talking to my father wouldn't really do anything, so I decided to confront Svetlana firsthand. I was making sure that she cracks under pressure when I investigate her, but that wasn't the case. She was early in the evening on Monday and arrived way before my father did. She was snooping around the house when I saw her and called her out and said, "Hello, little one," and she started walking towards me, and I was standing in front of her and could feel the coldness around her. I asked her, "What do you want?" And she said, "I don't want anything. How are you?" Her American accent wasn't very good, and I could see she was trying hard to keep it, but there was the Slavic roots in her language. I asked her, "What are your intentions with my father? Where are you from?" "Definitely not America." She smiled. "You are feisty. So many questions, little one. What is up with you?" And I said, "You could be anyone. Corporate espionage, national threat, spy, anyone. Give me your history and I will make my choice." And she smiled again and pulled her hairs back with her fingers and then said, "You watch too much Hollywood, kid." And then she put her hand on my leg and pulled me real close to her and kissed me and said, "It's all right, young one. I am not a threat to you." And then hugged me and said, "Believe me, I impose no threat." And she was pressing me against her body. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to seduce me so I would stop going after her. And then she said, "I will be here more than you could imagine. You will find out tomorrow." And then she kissed me again and left. My father came back and I told him everything. And I even said, "You should get her behind bars. She's definitely a spy. She tried to seduce me, father." And then he said, "She is just trying to connect with you. She's not seducing. She's trying to get close to you. Listen, let it go. She's going to be your new stepmom." That was enough to piss me off. I was quiet, and I decided that I'm not going to let her get married. She and father started preparing for marriage, and for once, father was genuinely happy, but I wasn't, sure still. She was staying the night, and both of them would go at it every night and irritated me. I would often catch her snooping around the house late night in her robe, and every time I caught her, she had an excuse. I was sure that I won't let this woman be my new stepmom. I was pretty sure that she was way more weird than me. She would hug me whenever I tried to confront her. She hugged me or kissed me or just got weirdly physically intimate. Her jig was definitely up with her advances. I knew that she was hiding something, and I was ready to take her down. One day, while she was hugging me, I decided to play her game, and I held her and I said, "I get it. You want to marry him, but I just want you to take good care of him, and don't let him spend too much time with the NASA." So this story takes place back in the early 2000s. I can't quite remember the exact year. It was late December, and Christmas was just right around the corner. My family tries to spend every other Christmas together, and we rotate on whose house will host the entire family. This year, it was my mother's turn. It was dinner time, and as you can imagine, with so many people in one house, it can get pretty crowded at the table. Most everyone decided that we're going to eat in the living room. Sometimes my mother didn't mind considering the fact that our kitchen table only sat, for I was sitting at the table next to my aunt with my small body. It was easy for me to sit on one side of the table with her. I had just stuck a large piece of broccoli on my fork and attempted to shove the vegetables in my mouth when it fell off my fork, landing in the cup of juice that I'd been drinking. I was disappointed, but the most rational thing in my mind. I got up with the intention of dumping out the drink in the sink, but before I could move, my aunt stopped me, questioning as to what I thought I was doing. I told her what happened and showed her the broccoli that was quickly starting to break apart in my drink. I turned to go dump the cup down the sink when my aunt stopped me again, telling me not to be wasteful and fish out the broccoli and drink the juice. I laughed, thinking she was joking, telling her, "You crazy," in a joking manner. But she didn't take it that way. Oh boy, did she not take it that way at all. My aunt went eerily quiet, and her face goes blank. I can instantly feel a cold chill run up my spine, and honestly had felt like I had stepped on a landmine. My aunt tells me in a low tone, "Don't call me crazy." My smile had long been wiped away, and I tried my best to backpedal, explaining to her that I didn't think that she was actually crazy, that it was just a playful spin on words. This didn't go over well either, because she grabbed my arm and leaned in closer, repeating, "Don't call me crazy." I instantly know that if I don't apologize, something bad would happen. So I quickly apologized to her, and that seemed to satisfy her. She made me sit down and hovered over me until I ate the now extremely soggy broccoli and chugged down the cup of juice. Now, this might not seem terrifying or scary at all. Well, that was just the setup for the events that were to follow that evening. Later that night, most of my family had gone out. I can't remember where, but the only people in the house were myself, my older sister, my aunt, and her daughter, my second eldest cousin. I was sitting in my room watching TV when I started to hear yelling from the remover. It quickly got louder, and I knew it was my aunt and cousin. I'm not sure what it started the whole thing, but I do know why it had escalated the way it did. The two were having an argument over something, when my cousin told my aunt she was acting crazy, as she did the same thing I had done earlier. But unlike me, my cousin didn't apologize. She tried to explain to her as I did, but just like before, she wasn't having any of that, and my aunt exploded. I'm sitting in my room terrified when I hear a loud bang from the wall causes me to jump. After the bang came my cousin's screams of pure terror. I was too scared to move until I heard Russian footsteps. I look at my door and soon see my sister running by. Next thing I know, I can hear my aunt screaming and ranting at the top of her lungs, my sister pleading and begging her to stop, and the psalms my cousin along with a loud thud noise. I finally get enough courage to leave my room and look into the next room. And what I saw was an image seared in my mind to this day. My cousin was on the bed in the fetal position, trying to make herself as small as possible, just sobbing. She cried so much that she left a large wet spot on the bedspread. My sister's laying on top of her, using her own body as a shield, and my aunt is hovering over the two, just screaming like a mad woman, and in her hand is one of her shoes. It was one of those women loafers with a light sole and slight heel. She was using the shoe to beat both my sister and cousin, swinging away trying to make contact with any amount of skin. She was really just trying to get my cousin, but didn't care that she was hitting my sister in the process. I'm frozen in absolute fear, never having seen anything like this before. Sure, Mother got mad at me and I got the occasional spanking, but nothing like this. I'm afraid to even say anything and fear that my aunt will turn on me and start attacking me. I slowly start to back away when I look to the ground. That caused my eyes to widen. On the floor was my sister's jewelry box. It was all wood and had magnetic drawers to prevent the jewelry from spilling out if you knocked it over. It was just laying on the ground, all the drawers open, and jewelry spilled on the floor. I looked at the box, then to my aunt, and quickly figured out what that loud banging noise I heard earlier was. Yes, my aunt had thrown my sister's jewelry box at my cousin. Luckily, my cousin dodged it and hit the wall, but she had thrown it with so much force that it caused all the magnetic drawers to pop open. That's when I truly realized my aunt had lost it. I turned and ran back in my room, locking the door behind me, waiting for my mom to come home. I wasn't old enough to have a cell phone, and we didn't have a house phone, so there was no one I could call. I stayed in my room until the shouting stopped. Turns out, my aunt had just gotten tired of hitting and yelling, so she went outside to smoke. My sister hugged my cousin, comforting her until everyone else got home. What bothers me most is that the entire incident was just brushed off. No one said anything to my aunt, nor reprimanded her for her behavior. I think my aunts had made it all seem not like a big deal when my cousin deserved it, and so did my sister for defending her cousin when she was in the wrong. She was believed over us because we were kids and she was the adult. I know this isn't really as scary or terrifying as what other people have experienced, but of all the messed up things that have occurred in my life, this had one of the bigger impacts. I can't even look at my aunt without thinking about it. I will say this. My family is finally starting to recognize the true person my aunt is, that her so-called discipline was actually abuse. They refuse to condone her behavior anymore, especially my mother. Despite the fact that I'm an adult now, my aunt still scares me. But at least now, I have my family to back me up.